Can a pirate forget the name of his ship? They say the ship is the soul of a sailor. A name whispered into wood and salt, carried by wind and war, etched into maps, logbooks, and the eyes of every man who ever sailed beside him. But what happens when the name fades? Not from history, but from the pirate himself? There was once a man who ruled the sea like a wound that never healed. They feared him. They followed him. They sang songs about him in coastal bars, where nobody dared speak too loud after sunset. He was called Captain Rourke, and he was searching relentlessly for a ship he claimed was his. A vessel named the Marrowlight. He would say it as if it tasted of gold and blood and something older. But behind the name, behind his eyes, there was something strange. A distance. A flicker of confusion that never left. Before we begin tonight's story, welcome to Whispers Before Sleep, your nightly escape into calming bedtime stories designed to help you unwind, relax, and drift off peacefully. I'm Alice, your narrator, and tonight's tale is brought to life by our kind host, Joe. Thank you for joining us. Tonight's story, The Pirate Who Couldn't Remember His Ship, is a mystery wrapped in memory. A poetic journey across forgotten waters and faded names. We hope it helps you find the good sleep you deserve. And if it does, we'd love for you to subscribe so you never miss a story that guides you gently into dreamland. He spoke of the Marrowlight as though it had vanished in a storm, as though it had been stolen or sunk without a trace, as though it had once known him more intimately than he knew himself. He sailed alone these days. Maps covered in ink. Notes scribbled in the margins. Pieces of memory scattered across forgotten islands. And every time someone asked him what exactly he was chasing, his answer was always the same. I'll know it when I see it. But no one else had ever heard of such a ship. No logs. No sightings. Just a name that made even old sea captains shift in their chairs. This is not a story about treasure, or conquest, or storms that rage over shallow graves. This is a story about memory, and the terrible silence that follows when the mind begins to forget what the heart still remembers. Tonight, you'll hear the tale of a pirate who searched the ocean for years, not for a ship, but for something far more fragile. Something he once swore never to forget. Captain Rourke no longer commands a crew. He sails a weather-beaten vessel, its name scratched off the side. No flag, no purpose. Just the open water stretching in every direction, silent as a withheld secret. He mutters under his breath, as if someone might still be listening, as if the sea could answer. The Marrowlight. That name, he says it often, softly, as if trying to coax it out of the fog. But when he tries to remember it, its shape, its sails, the color of its wood, his mind refuses. Why can't I remember what it looked like? That question drifts in and out of his voice, looping like tide against hull. He asks it aloud. To the wind. To the sky. To the waves that do not speak. He has maps, old ones, stained with brine, creased with time, and yet there are places where the ink simply stops. Whole regions torn from memory, blank coastlines where something must have happened. And then there's the logbook, the page where his ship's name should be ripped clean out. Not scribbled, not redacted, gone, as if it was never meant to be remembered. He lights a lantern each night, placing it at the bow, waiting as though someone might see it. Someone might follow it home. The stars above him still know how to shine, but they refuse to guide him. He begins to question his own memory. The Marrowlight, was it real? A ship? A dream? Why do none of the sailors he passes know the name? Why do they flinch when he says it? Sometimes he speaks to an empty chair at his table. He pours 2 cups of tea. He forgets to drink his. He's no longer chasing gold or victory. He's chasing something quieter, something missing. He marks the walls of his cabin with dates he can't explain. Places he's certain he's been, but cannot find again. Each morning he wakes with the same word on his lips, Marrowlight, and each day it means something different. There's a painting tucked in the storage hatch beneath his bed. Faded. Water-stained. It shows a ship, but its sails are blurred with time. And at the bottom, a single name is signed in looping cursive, Mara. He stares at it for hours sometimes, brushing the canvas gently, as if it might speak back. He doesn't know who she is, or why her name makes his throat tighten. But he knows she was real. He can feel that much. The ocean is wide, but Rourke's world is narrowing. One word, one name, one shadow keeps circling back. He doesn't remember when the quest began, only that it never ends. And somewhere inside him, he fears it's not a ship he's forgotten, but a part of himself. The part that knew how to love. The part that once trusted another soul enough to whisper, "You keep me afloat." He docks at a port with no name, at least, not one he remembers. It's one of those places that never appears on maps. But sailors speak of it in passing, like a memory they aren't sure they lived through. The buildings lean as though they've grown tired of standing. Fish hang on hooks that haven't seen salt in weeks. The people here glance over their shoulders before they speak. If they speak at all. Captain Rourke ties off his ship and steps onto the warped planks of the pier. The lantern above the customs post flickers once, then stays dark. He asks the harbor master, an old man with salt-bleached hair and a scar that pulls his mouth sideways. "Have you seen a ship named the Marrowlight pass through?" The man doesn't answer right away. He looks Rourke over slowly, like someone trying to remember where they've seen a ghost before. Then he turns the ledger toward him. "No such name," he mutters. "Not here. Not anywhere." Rourke's fingers tremble slightly as he traces the names written down: the Rose Shade, the Iron Echo, the Salty's Horn. But not hers. Not the one he's looking for. He doesn't argue. He just leaves the office, lips pressed tight, eyes unsettled. In the port's tavern, the floor is sticky with old rum. Sailors sit hunched like secrets kept too long. Rourke spots a face he recognizes. Jansen. He was once quartermaster aboard Rourke's first ship, years ago, before the name Marrowlight had ever touched Rourke's tongue. Rourke calls his name. Jansen stiffens. "I know you," Rourke says. "You served beside me. You remember the Marrowlight, don't you?" The tavern falls silent at the name. It lands like a stone in still water. Soft, but deep. Jansen shakes his head slowly. "There's no ship by that name," he says. "I think you've been too long at sea." But Rourke doesn't leave. He orders a drink and sits at the edge of the room, watching, listening, and then a whisper from a girl tending the lanterns. She leans close as she passes, just for a moment. "That name brings nothing but ghosts," she says. Then she walks on, never looking back. Rourke blinks, suddenly unsure if she ever spoke at all. He presses onward, asking, searching. An old merchant shakes his head. A cartographer refuses to meet his eyes. "You're looking for something that was never built," says a sailor missing 3 fingers. "Or maybe something that built you, once." Each answer tightens the knot in Rourke's chest. Each denial feels like losing her all over again, whoever she was. But then, a fragment of hope. Outside a candlemaker's shop, a wind-worn sea chart is nailed to the wall. Faint, nearly erased. But there, in the upper left quadrant, almost invisible, a scribbled note. She sang storm still. ML. He tears the paper down. He holds it close. Reads it again. She sang storms still. A phrase only two people ever used. Him and Mara. The initials. ML Marrowlight? Marrowlight? His heart stumbles over the connection. Suddenly, memories flood in. A voice in the rain, hands bandaging his side, soft humming in the dark below deck. He clenches the chart in his fist. She was real. And someone remembers. He returns to the ship at dusk. The fog has thickened. The dock is nearly gone behind a veil of gray. Rourke climbs aboard, slower than before. He lights the lantern again, brighter this time. And as it flickers, he whispers, "I haven't forgotten you." But whether he's speaking to a ship, a woman, or a part of himself he lost long ago, even he no longer knows. There are nights when the sea speaks. Not in thunder or roar, but in murmurs. Soft syllables carried through wind-split silence. Captain Rourke has heard them, or thinks he has, since leaving the nameless port. His world has narrowed to water, wood, and whisper. He wakes more often than he sleeps now. The dreams are worse. Each time he closes his eyes, he finds himself aboard a ship he cannot name. The sky turns dark too fast. The crew vanishes, and always, always, the sea rises. Not in rage, but with purpose. And just before he wakes, the deck beneath him gives way. The ship does not explode or break. It simply disappears, slipping under him like a memory that refuses to hold. He never drowns, but he always wakes gasping. Daylight is no relief. In the stillness between waves, he sometimes sees it. The shape of a figure standing on the waterline, just where sea kisses horizon. She never moves, never calls. And yet, the way the wind shifts, it feels like she's waiting. He blinks, and she's gone. Or perhaps she was never there. Still, he whispers the name. Marrowlight. Not shouted into the void, but spoken low, like a vow made in secret. He searches the sky for birds. There are none. The compass he keeps, an heirloom wrapped in leather, begins to spin on calm days. His maps, already water-worn, begin to fade. Whole coastlines vanish. Inlets and reefs that once guided him dissolve into blank parchment. And his logbook, where he's written everything since he first captained a vessel, shows something strange. Pages are torn, yes, but not ragged or frayed like time took them. No, these pages were cut, clean, deliberate, as if someone or something did not want him remembering. He tries to retrace his steps. He returns to the map, but no matter where he begins, the trail always ends in fog. Still, he sails forward, into waters the world has forgotten. And with each passing day, the name Marrowlight changes on his tongue. It's no longer just a ship. It's a whisper of her, of someone. He begins to write letters to her. They're not structured, just phrases, scattered thoughts. He tucks them into bottles and casts them overboard, not expecting answers, only hoping the sea remembers. And then, a shift. He begins to forget things he should not. The names of old friends, the faces of fallen crew, the routes he once knew as surely as his own hands. They slip through him. Only Marrowlight stays. That name. That ache. Unmoored from meaning, but heavy as iron in his chest. One morning he wakes before the sun, There's no dream to recall, only a sensation that something was here, beside him. On the deck, faint footprints, too small for his own boots, too recent for the sea to erase. He stares at them as the light grows. They lead to the stern and vanish mid-step, as if the person had simply stepped into the wind. And then, the voice. Not loud, not clear, but undeniable, soft, female, familiar, calling a name, not his, but one he hasn't heard in years. He rushes to the edge. Nothing, only sea. And yet, in the quiet that follows, the air feels not empty, not full, just waiting. He lowers the sails, sits at the helm, and listens. Not for storms, but for memories. Because behind the name Marrowlight, he knows now there was someone real. Not a ship. Not a tale told under tavern breath. Someone who once held his hand. Someone who said his name like it was worth saving. And somewhere, somehow, he let her fall from memory. Or worse, chose to forget. The bottle he cast that night carries no letter. Just a single word carved into cork. Forgive. Captain Rourke knew deep down that the sea never forgot. It might erase what the world wanted to remember, but it never forgot. He sails now toward islands no man cares to chart, places that time had long abandoned, where no ship dares linger and no wind ever carries a friendly breeze. Yet, he continues, for here, at the very edges of the world, there is a chance, no matter how faint, that the sea might answer him, might reveal what he's already lost. The first island he finds is little more than jagged rocks and blackened earth. Yet it holds secrets. Carved into the weathered stone of a forgotten temple, the name Marrowlight stares back at him, etched by hands long dust. Not a ship's name, not anymore, but a beacon. The same name he's whispered for so long, and yet now it feels strange in his mouth, unfamiliar. He moves further inland. The villagers, what few remain, watch him with blank stares, their faces hollowed by years of isolation. But there's a recognition when he speaks her name. A hesitation. A flicker of something too old to be named. A boy, no more than 10, approaches. He holds something in his hands. A scrap of paper, tattered with age, drawn with wild, erratic lines. A child's scribble, frantic. But the words, they are unmistakable. Marrowlight was a stormcaller, a healer, a pirate's heart, who saved the lost. The boy says nothing as he hands it over. His eyes, hollow, hold a quiet sorrow that the boy should never have known. Rourke folds the paper with shaking hands. He steps back, into the shadow of the temple. The memories he has of her, of Mara, are fragmented, fleeting images. He sees her laughing under a rain-soaked sky, feels her hands steady against his trembling grip as a ship threatened to split in two. Her voice, a soft lullaby against the roar of the waves. But now, in this cold, forgotten place, something shifts. The weight of guilt, like an anchor, drags him deeper. It's not the sea that has been unkind. It's what he allowed himself to become. A pirate, chasing riches, glory, power. While she, her heart, was always tied to the sea. And in the end, he had betrayed her, chasing things that would never fill the void she once occupied. On another island, a woman's voice calls to him from the mist. It is not a voice he knows, but it feels as if it should be. There, on the cliffs above the cove, he discovers more drawings, more words, written not by any hand he recognizes, but by someone who once knew her, someone who loved her too. The tales are old now, They speak of Mara as more than a healer, more than a storm caller. They speak of her as a legend, a myth, a ship that sailed the seas on wings of fire, but never sailed alone. Always guided by the heart of the pirate who forgot her. He follows these clues, now desperate for any connection to a time when she was whole. The scrolls tell of her grace, her power, and her reluctance to leave behind the life she had chosen with him. But the deeper he searches, the more the island mocks him. The stories twist, reform, until he can no longer tell if the island is trying to remember or if it is trying to bury her. And then, as if the sea itself had a hand in the matter, he finds a box hidden in the sand. A small chest, rusted with age, sealed with salt but unmistakable. Inside is another scroll. The writing is clear, even though the ink has long faded. It reads, "You called me your ship, Captain, but a ship is only as strong as its anchor. I was never yours to own. I was always my own." The words feel like a slap, sharp, cold, and yet they hurt in a way nothing else ever has. She had always knew he couldn't own her, that the sea was her home, not a pirate's cage. But he had never understood, not until now, not until he was left alone, without the name of the ship, without her voice in his ear, telling him which way to turn. He stares at the words, feeling a deep, hollow emptiness settle inside him. The guilt has no place to hide now. The truth has been laid bare. He was a man who had once chased a legend and destroyed it. He was a pirate, who had stolen the one thing he needed most. And in doing so, he had severed the only thing that ever kept him afloat. The sound of the waves crashes around him, louder now. His breath quickens as the weight of it all settles deep in his chest. He thinks back to her, to their last night together. The storm they faced. The promises made. But it wasn't enough. He wasn't enough. The island, silent and still, seems to watch him. And as he closes his eyes, the name Marrowlight comes to him once more. This time, there is no question. Only the memory of the one who kept him from sinking. The one he had let slip through his fingers. The storm came without warning. One moment, the sea was calm, a perfect reflection of the sky. The next, it was chaos. A tempest unlike any Rourke had faced before. Not just wind and rain, but something heavier, more unforgiving. Something personal. The ship creaked and groaned under the pressure, its sails snapping like the claws of a beast, its timbers bending, breaking as the storm clawed at it. But Rourke couldn't think. He couldn't remember. All he could do was fight. Fight the fury of the waves, fight his own body as it was thrown across the deck, fight the gnawing pull at the edges of his mind. His hands gripped the wheel with white knuckles. His eyes, wild, unfocused, searched the horizon for something, anything, a sign to lead him through. But it was too late. Before he could shout a command, before his mind could catch up to his body, the ship lurched, throwing him against the mast. The world spun, and then darkness. Rourke stirs. The sound of the wind, of the storm, fades away. He's not on the ship anymore. No longer fighting the elements. Instead, he is somewhere else. He's in the past. A memory he'd long buried, but one that surfaced now, uninvited. Mara is there, standing beside him, on the deck of another ship, the storm raging around them. But Mara is different. She is the calm in the chaos. He remembers it now, how she'd always been that way. Her eyes steady, her breath slow, her voice like a balm for his soul. She wasn't running. She wasn't scared. She was guiding the storm with nothing more than her presence. She whispered something, her lips moving gently, barely audible over the howling winds. And just like that, the storm began to yield. The waves calmed. The sky, once dark and threatening, softened. He hears her again in the memory, calling him softly, but urgently, Rourke. And then she smiles. One of those smiles that always seem to light up the dark spaces between them. It was all so real. But then, as quickly as the calm came, it was gone. The memory, once vivid, slipped away from his grasp. And with it, the voice. The storm, once again, roared back to life in his mind, and with it, the cold realization that he was alone. Rourke's eyes snap open. The waves are still crashing against the ship. The storm still rages outside. His heart beats wildly in his chest. But it's not just the storm. It's the weight of the loss. He's losing her again. Losing the memory of her. He doesn't know how long he's been unconscious. The storm, the flashes of memory, they are fragments now. Blurry. Distorted. But the feelings? The ache? That's real. Something about the storm had triggered the memory of Mara's presence. But the more he tried to hold on to it, the more it slipped through his fingers. The more he tried to see her face, the more it faded into the mist. He reaches out, desperate, as if he could somehow grasp the moments that are slipping away. And that's when he hears it again. Her voice, in the memory, clearer this time. But the words are lost. He closes his eyes again. He tries to force the memory back, tries to hear her one more time, feel her hand on his. But the harder he tries, the more distant she becomes. He only hears the storm, now echoing in his mind, and the crashing weight of his own guilt. It's only now, after the storm has torn at him once again, that he realizes the truth he's been running from. The storm, it was never the sea. It was always him. The wreckage stood silent against the shore, its once mighty frame now worn and battered by years of neglect. It had once been a vessel, grand, powerful, but now it was little more than a skeleton of broken planks and rusted iron. Captain Rourke stood at the edge of the wreck, his eyes tracing the jagged remnants of its hull. He recognized it at once, not the ship he sailed now, no, but something far more haunting. This was the ship he had stolen. It had been years since the battle, but the memories of that day still lingered. The blood, the fire, the roar of cannons, the chaos of the fight. Mara had been there, right beside him, their lives intertwined in that moment. But Rourke had never asked himself what happened to her that day. What had become of her after the smoke had cleared? Had she fallen with the ship? Was she lost in the waves? The wreck before him, the one he once claimed as his prize, now felt like a cruel reminder of that answer he had never allowed himself to find. Rourke crouched down and ran his hand along the shattered wood. The ship he captained now, the one he sailed with the memory of Mara always at the back of his mind, was never truly his. It had been stolen from a rival, another pirate, another legend, during the same battle where Mara had disappeared. The memory of that day hit him like a physical blow. The wrecked ship, the smell of burning wood, the cries of the wounded. The fight had been savage, a blur of rage and desperation. But in that madness, he had taken more than a ship. He had taken a future. He had stolen a chance to make things right. But he had also stolen her. Rourke's fingers trembled as they touched the remnants of the ship's mast. He didn't remember much about the battle after that moment, only the haze of blood, the blur of movement. But one thing was certain. Mara had been there, She had been part of that crew, and yet there was no trace of her now, no body, no sign of her at all. The thought gnawed at him. What had truly happened? Had she been on board when the ship was caught in the flames? Had she perished alongside his rival? Or had she slipped away in the chaos, lost to the sea in the same way she had vanished from his life? But why? Why had he never thought to ask? Rourke took a step back from the wreck. The questions loomed larger than the wreckage itself. The name Marrowlight still echoed in his mind, though it brought no answers, only more confusion. The ship he sought, the vessel he had chased for so long, was more than just wood and sail. It was a memory. He had built legends around that name, turning it into something that could never be found, because he had never truly wanted to find the truth. The storm in his mind had always been there. He had simply failed to recognize it. As Rourke stood there, staring at the wreck, a chilling thought pierced through the fog of his mind. What if Mara hadn't just been lost? What if she had been left? What if, in his obsession to claim glory and vengeance, he destroyed the very thing that had once saved him? The answers, his answers, lay beneath the waves. But they were buried. And Rourke was beginning to realize that they always had been. The wreckage would not yield its secrets. The storm would not give him clarity. And the ship, his ship, would not carry him to the place he needed to go. The search for the Marrowlight had never been about the ship. It had always been about her. Rourke turned away from the wreck, the cold weight of guilt settling on his shoulders. The questions lingered. They would not let him go. And the storm, the one that had never ceased, was closer now than it had ever been before. The tavern was dimly lit, its walls soaked in the salt of the sea, as though every drop of rain had seeped through the wood and become part of the foundation. It was a place where time seemed to bend, a relic of a bygone era. The smell of stale ale mixed with the musk of the ocean breeze that found its way through the cracks in the stone. And there, at a corner table, sat a man whose eyes spoke of secrets. Secrets buried too deep to surface until now. Captain Rourke approached, the weight of his quest pressing against his chest with each step. His boots made no sound on the floor as he drew closer, his heart thudding in a steady rhythm, almost as if it knew what was coming. The man at the table didn't look up at first, his back hunched and shoulders hunched in the way of someone who had seen too much. Rourke hesitated for a moment, his hand resting on the back of a chair, as if the very act of sitting would bring him closer to something he had never truly wanted to know. But the man's voice broke through the silence, low and gravelly. "You're looking for answers," the former quartermaster said, his eyes still focused on the empty mug in front of him. "Answers you won't like." Rourke took a seat slowly, the words hanging in the air between them. He didn't speak right away. There were no formalities, no pleasantries. There was only the weight of years, the weight of a life lived in pursuit of something long lost. "I've been chasing something for years," Rourke finally said, his voice rough, almost like a whisper. "A ship. The Marrowlight. Everyone says it never existed, but I know it did. It was real. It has to be." The quartermaster took a slow sip from his mug, his eyes narrowing as though trying to see past Rourke's desperation. He set the mug down with a soft thud, leaning forward just enough to make their conversation more intimate, more dangerous. "Rourke," the man said, his voice firm, cutting through the tension in the room. "You never chased a ship. You chased her." For a moment, the world seemed to shift. Rourke's breath caught, the weight of those words sinking in. His pulse quickened and a sharp, cold breath entered his lungs. "What are you saying?" Rourke's voice trembled, though he did not let it show. He leaned in, too. The questions he'd buried beneath the surface for so long began to stir. The quartermaster's eyes softened for a fleeting moment, then grew hard again. He leaned back, as though preparing to tell a story he had long refused to share. "Mara was the Marrowlight, Rourke," he said, the words hanging in the air like an anchor, dragging Rourke deeper into a sea of truth he wasn't prepared for. "You called her your ship, but she wasn't. She was a person, a woman who saved your life more times than you cared to admit." Rourke felt a chill run through him. His chest tightened. He had known Mara as a companion, a partner on the waves, but a ship? That thought, that idea felt foreign, as if he had been blind to something so obvious all along. "She begged you to leave the pirate life," the quartermaster continued, his voice laced with regret. "She begged you to leave it all behind, but you didn't listen. You were too consumed by your hunger for glory. You thought you could have it all, her and the life of a pirate." Rourke's mind began to spin, trying to piece together the fragments of memories, the visions that had haunted him for so long. Images of Mara's face, her voice calling to him through the fog, her warmth, her presence. Had he truly been so blind? Was he so lost in his own ambition that he couldn't see what was standing right in front of him? "She didn't leave you, Rourke," the quartermaster added quietly. "She was caught between cannon fire, between loyalties that weren't hers to carry. And when the smoke cleared, she was gone." The words settled on Rourke like a crushing weight, sinking deep into his chest, until the air felt thick, suffocating. It had never been about the ship. It had always been about her. And in chasing the idea of a ship, he had abandoned the one person who had kept him anchored, the one person who had truly kept him afloat in the storms of his soul. He felt the lump rise in his throat, the sting of 1,000 unspoken apologies. His hands clenched into fists, his knuckles white from the pressure, as he tried to hold it all together. But the quartermaster wasn't finished. His voice softened, almost as though he were speaking to a ghost. "You buried her, Rourke. You buried the truth beneath lies in the name of a ship. You could never remember her the way she deserved, so you turned her into a legend. A ship that never existed. But legends don't fill the hole in your heart, do they?" Rourke's mind swirled with the weight of it all. He had lied to himself. He had told himself that the ship, the Marrowlight, was something worth finding. But now he understood. He had been searching for a ghost, a ship that was nothing more than a symbol of his own denial. He had lost her, and he had kept her lost, for fear of confronting the truth. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping harshly against the wooden floor, and turned toward the door. The words still echoed in his mind, a constant, painful reminder of everything he had failed to see. As he reached the threshold, the quartermaster's voice stopped him. "You may never find what you're looking for, Captain," the man called after him. "Not unless you find it in yourself first." Rourke paused, his hand on the doorframe, but he didn't turn around. There was nothing more to say. Rourke walked out into the night, the weight of the truth heavy on his shoulders. The ship, the Marrowlight, it had never been a ship at all. But how could he make peace with that? How could he ever forgive himself for the price he had paid? And yet, somewhere beneath the pain, there was a flicker of something else. Perhaps not redemption, but understanding. Perhaps, in time, he would learn to sail through the storm inside him, without the name of a ship to guide him. The winds had shifted, carrying with them the heavy scent of salt, and the promise of a long-anticipated storm. Captain Rourke stood at the edge of the small, desolate islet, the place that had become the final resting place of Mara. A grave without a marker, a piece of earth too isolated for anyone to remember. It was just a patch of land, as nameless as the woman who had been lost to the depths of his own mind. The only sounds were the crashing waves against the jagged rocks and the relentless gusts of wind. But within Rourke, a storm had been quietly gathering for years, one he could no longer ignore. He stood over the unmarked grave, his heart thundering in his chest. His boots shifted uneasily on the damp earth, his gaze fixed on the ground where she lay. The weight of the years, the weight of his own mistakes, pressed on him harder than any battle he had ever fought. This was the place, he thought, the place where I buried the truth, the place where I buried her. He had never allowed himself to feel it before. The grief that had always lingered in the shadows of his mind, hidden behind obsession and anger, began to creep forward, soft and slow. The stone in his chest cracked open, and for the first time in years, tears began to form, rising up like forgotten memories that had been suppressed for far too long. He remembered her eyes. Her gaze had always been steady, always full of something warm and alive, something he had refused to see, blinded by his own arrogance. He remembered the way she would laugh, that sound that seemed to fill the empty spaces around them, even in the darkest moments. And then there was the plea, "Come with me, be free." Those words echoed in his mind now, sharp and clear, slicing through the fog of his memories. She had begged him to leave it all behind, the piracy, the violence, the endless chase for something that would never bring him peace. But he had refused. He had chosen the life of a pirate over the life they could have had together. He had chosen the legend of the Marrowlight over her. What have I done? The question repeated itself in his mind, over and over again, as though trying to claw its way out of him. The wind picked up again, tugging at his coat, and he felt a knot tighten in his stomach. His chest ached, a deep, raw ache he hadn't known was even possible. He had told himself for so long that he was chasing a ship, that the Marrowlight was his salvation, his redemption. But now, standing here in the cold, desolate place she had been left behind, he knew the truth. It had never been a ship. It had always been her. Rourke's knees buckled beneath him, and he sank to the ground in front of the grave. His fingers brushed the cold earth, the sharp reality of his actions sinking in. His throat tightened as the dam of his emotions finally broke. He wept, the first time since the day she died, since the day he had abandoned her. He had not allowed himself to grieve for her. He had buried that grief deep inside, using rage and obsession to cover the pain. But now, it was undeniable. The grief surged through him, sweeping away the walls he had built around his heart. It was a grief that had festered for years, but only now did he fully understand its weight. The storm above him roared to life, the clouds churning with dark intent. But this storm, this one didn't come from the heavens. It came from within him, a storm he could no longer fight, no longer push to the back of his mind. For the first time, he realized that the battles he had fought on the seas had never been the true enemy. The true battle had always been with himself, with the choices he had made, with the person he had become. And it was this internal storm, this internal turmoil, that had drowned him all along. He closed his eyes, feeling the tears mix with the rain as they ran down his face. His body trembled with the force of his sorrow. The years of silence, of pretending to be something he wasn't, had caught up to him in the most painful way. He had spent so much time searching for something on the ocean that had never existed. All along, the thing he had truly lost was buried beneath the surface of his own heart. And now, With the storm breaking above him, he understood. The storm he had been chasing was never out there. It had always been inside. The grief was overwhelming, a tidal wave that crashed over him with a fury he could not control. He had never allowed himself to feel it, never allowed himself to mourn the woman he had loved. And now, with the weight of that grief pressing against him, he could not deny it any longer. The name he had whispered for so long, the name of the ship, had always been her name. The Marrowlight was never just a ship. It was a person, and Rourke had let her slip away, caught between his pride and his rage. As the rain poured down, mixing with his tears, he whispered her name into the wind. And for the first time in years, he felt a sense of release. A sense that, perhaps, this storm was the beginning of something new. Something he had to face. Something he had to overcome. But the truth was that there was no easy resolution. There was no ship to find, no legend to chase. There was only the weight of his choices and the long road ahead of him. One that would take him into the depths of his own heart to face the ghosts of his past. And in the distance, the storm raged on, as if echoing the turmoil within him. The turmoil that would never truly calm until he found a way to forgive himself. But for now, all Rourke could do was sit there, his heart broken and raw, as the waves crashed against the shore, and the grief finally washed over him in a way it had never done before. End narration. The sea, once a restless and unforgiving expanse, now lay eerily still before Captain Rourke. The waters lapped gently at the shore, the usual tumultuous rhythm of the waves replaced by an unsettling quiet. The memory that had guided him here to this hidden cove felt both distant and near at the same time, like a dream he couldn't quite hold on to. This was the place where they had found solace, the place where Mara had once taken him when the world outside had become too loud. There was no ship, no sign of anything that would give him comfort. Just the quiet, empty cove stretching out before him, and a memory, an echo of something that had slipped between the cracks of time. His boots crunched against the sand as he walked, each step slow, deliberate. The world around him was unnaturally still, as if the earth itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to break the silence. The ocean, which had once been a vast, unrelenting force in his life, now seemed muted, subdued. The storm inside him, the storm that had driven him for so long, was suddenly calm. And then his eyes caught something, a glint of glass half buried in the sand. It was a bottle. Rourke crouched down, his heart hammering in his chest. He wasn't sure why this small object, this simple bottle, made his pulse quicken. Perhaps it was the hope that something, anything, might still remain. That something of Mara could be found in this forsaken place. With trembling hands, he dug it out of the sand, the weight of it strangely familiar. He twisted the cap, and as he pulled out the rolled parchment inside, his breath caught in his throat. The paper was old, the edges frayed and worn. His fingers trembled as he unfurled it, a wave of nostalgia and guilt washing over him with each inch of the paper he revealed. It was Mara's journal. Her handwriting was unmistakable, elegant, fluid, like the sea she had once calmed. And there, at the bottom of the page, a single line struck him harder than any cannon blast ever could. You called me your ship, the thing that kept you afloat. But love, even ships need anchor. The words hung in the air, sinking into his soul like the weight of the ocean's depths. They were simple words, but they carried the weight of everything he had lost, everything he had failed to see. Rourke sank to his knees, the journal still clutched in his hands. His eyes blurred with tears, the steady rhythm of the waves now mingling with the echoes of Mara's voice. She had tried to tell him. She had tried to show him to make him understand that there was more to life than chasing fleeting legends, that there was more to love than building myths around it. And he had failed her. His mind raced through the years, through the battles, the victories, the betrayals. He had thought he was chasing the memory of a ship, a legend. But in reality, he had been chasing her, a woman, a soul, a love he had let slip away because he had been too stubborn, too consumed by his own pride. Rourke's heart cracked open with the realization. The ship had never been a ship at all. It had always been her. The Marrowlight was never just wood and sail. It was her spirit, her strength, her light that had guided him through the darkness. And now, with nothing left but this journal, he understood. He had let her go. He had watched as she slipped through his fingers, and in doing so, he had sunk into a sea of his own making, a sea of regret, of loneliness, of self-inflicted suffering. For the first time, Rourke allowed himself to feel the full weight of that loss. It wasn't just about a ship. It was about her, the woman who had saved him, the woman who had tried to lead him to a better life, the woman he had abandoned. And now, here in this quiet cove, with the soft waves lapping at the shore and the journal of Mara still warm in his hands, Rourke felt something shift inside him. The storm that had raged within him for so long began to calm, slowly but surely. The anger, the grief, the obsession, it all started to fade, replaced by a painful yet profound peace. For the first time, he could see clearly. There was no more chasing after legends, no more futile search for something that could never be found. The answers had always been here, in the quiet moments, in the love he had lost and the forgiveness he had denied himself. Rourke let the journal slip from his hands, allowing it to rest gently on the sand. He stood, the weight of the years pressing less heavily on his shoulders, his eyes now filled not with rage or regret, but with a quiet understanding. He had sought redemption through the wrong things, through battle, through fame, through the chase. But now, he knew that redemption lay in accepting the truth, in letting go of the myths he had built and facing the person he had been. The cove was still. The ocean stretched out before him, calm and endless, as though waiting for him to take the first step toward healing. There was no more ship to find, no more ghosts to chase. There was only the journey forward. Rourke took a deep breath, the salty air filling his lungs. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, he wasn't afraid. He was free. The silence of the cove was almost overwhelming, broken only by the soft sound of Rourke's breath. His fingers, trembling just slightly, held the journal in his hands as he read. The words, though faded and weathered by time, were clear. He began to whisper them aloud, his voice soft, almost as if speaking to the ocean itself, as if Mara could hear him now. Her entries were warm. They painted pictures in his mind, pictures of laughter shared under moonlit skies, of quiet moments on the deck as the sun set, of promises whispered between them, fragile yet full of hope. Her words were poetic, delicate, the kind of words that seemed to float on the air, carried away with the wind. He could hear her voice in them, feel the essence of the woman he had once known. He read quietly, letting the words settle into his soul like a balm. The sea calls to you in ways I never could. It's a part of you, just as I am. But never forget, Captain, that the storm inside you is not the sea. It is your heart, and it is the one thing that can break you. He paused, allowing the words to wash over him. She had known. She had always known the battle inside him, the storm that raged long before he had ever set foot on the sea. There was a stillness between the words now. Time seemed to stretch, and for a moment Rourke could almost hear the rustling of the leaves, the sound of Mara's voice, as if she were standing beside him, guiding him through the storm. He let the pages turn slowly under his fingertips, knowing that he was coming closer to the end, to the final words she had written. The last entry was simple, the ink now faint but still readable. If you're reading this, maybe you remembered. Maybe the storm passed. His chest tightened. The storm had passed. But the storm had not just been the sea. It had been him. His own unwillingness to face the truth. His inability to let go of the legend he had built. The storm inside him had raged for far too long. The words were her final gift to him. A soft surrender. A quiet plea for him to move on. For him to find peace. Rourke sat there for a moment, the journal still in his hands, his eyes closing as he felt the weight of the words settle in his heart. There were no more questions, no more regrets. Only the truth now. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small, weathered lantern. The light was faint, barely a glow, but it was enough to illuminate the pages of Mara's journal one last time. Rourke carefully placed the journal in the lantern, the flame flickering softly within, and with one last glance at the cove, he stood. He made his way to the water's edge, the sand cool beneath his feet, and without a word, he let the lantern go. It floated on the water, the light swaying with the tide, a gentle beacon for what had been, and what was now let go. The lantern drifted further out, carried away by the currents, just as Mara had once been carried away by the tides of fate. Rourke stood still, watching it disappear into the horizon, his heart heavy but somehow lighter all at once. The past was a distant shore now, fading into the distance, and the future, his future, remained open, endless, and uncharted. He felt the weight of the storm lifting, not from the sky, but from within him. It was a quiet release, a peace that had been waiting all along. And for the first time in years, Captain Rourke didn't look back. He turned and walked away from the shore, his steps steady and sure. The future calling him, the storm finally at rest. The moonlight glinted off the water, casting a silvery glow across the waves. Rourke's figure, now a silhouette against the vastness of the sea, moved slowly, purposefully. His boots pressed against the cool, wet sand, each step steady, no longer weighed down by the past. The storm inside him had subsided, leaving only the quiet rhythm of the ocean in its wake. Some chased ships for treasure, some for freedom, but the rarest pirates chase what they've lost within. The sea whispered around him, the waves lapping gently against the shore, like a quiet invitation to leave the past behind and step into the unknown. Rourke paused at the water's edge, his gaze fixed on the horizon where the last trace of Mara's lantern had disappeared. He didn't look back. There was nothing left for him on that shore. His eyes, once clouded with confusion, now held a clarity, the kind that only comes when you finally accept the truth about yourself. And so, he walked forward, the sound of the waves softening with every step he took, his silhouette growing smaller in the distance. Slowly, steadily, he faded into the night. As Rourke's figure became nothing more than a memory against the horizon, the scene shifted, the last echoes of his journey fading into the gentle rhythm of the sea. Some stories end, but the sea never forgets. If this story kept you company tonight, don't forget to subscribe for more Whisper Journeys.